Let's get into the 7 observations from round 10. There's a rule that's extinct, I reckon. The 10-metre protected area 50-metre penalty is gone. They don't pay it anymore. Players run through it all the time and the umpires don't pay it. And I've got to say, the game is so much better for it. So congratulations to the adjustment that was made in the off-season where you can't, if a player your opposition's running through, you can go with them. I never see it. You remember the last time a 10-metre protected 50's been paid? They were paying them all the time last year. Much better, the game for it. Observation number 2. Essendon will play finals. 5 wins they've got. They'll win the next 3. West Coast, North and Carlton at the MCG, I'm giving them. 8 and 5 at the bye. Then comes a really difficult 5-week stretch for them where they just need to win 1. Freo, Port Adelaide at the MCG, that's a very realistic possibility they could win that. Adelaide, Geelong, Western Bulldogs. He's got to win one of that 5 after the bye. It's a hard one because then it becomes easy. Sydney at Marvel.
They're up to 9 now.
Yep, they're up to 9, Gerard. Sydney at Marvel. West Coast again, North Melbourne again, GWS and Collingwood. They win 4 of those 5, which gets them to 13 at a minimum, and they make the 8. Essendon fans, so welcome back to finals for you.
You can't argue with that. I think the football that they've played against in their last 5 weeks, they've been beaten by the team that's 1st, 3rd, 5th and 6th, and they beat Melbourne, who was 2nd. So that was as of last week. So you look at the football they've been playing against any other team, they probably would have won those games because they were into the game till late and got overrun towards the end of it. But you can't argue with that comment game.
And they'll get some players back,
good.
won't they, Sammy? Parrish at some stage will come back and it's a significant calf
injury.
Laverde
back next week.
Will come back.
Can we talk about Sam Wiedemann?
Yeah, he looked good.
He's had a great month. I mean, he's there on his last efforts. Couldn't quite get there in 8 years at Melbourne. And yet, I think whatever Brad's done with him, or whoever the forward coach, or himself, he's given himself a real chance to make an impact on the competition.
If Zach Merritt's playing there, they're every chance to play finals. I reckon that was unbelievable.
Wiedemann always had that potential. There's a few games for Melbourne where you could just sort of see him as a big, strong forward target, could take a mark, but it was just the consistency that let him down. They probably had Brown in favour of him.
I reckon this year is going to highlight observation number 3, why a wild card round is worthy of the discussion. Because of the inequities of the draw, I think it would be a good experience to have Essendon, who will get to finals, as I've just said, largely on the back of playing North and West Coast twice and the 4 wins that they'll get automatically guaranteed from that. So if 7 played 10, 8 played 9, the rest had a week off, I think we'd truly find out who deserves a spot in the finals because there's going to be some good sides that miss out, and it may be an Adelaide, it may be St Kilda, one of those teams that won't make the 8 because perhaps their draw is a little bit more difficult than the sides that do make it.
Does that mean you don't have a bye before the finals? Yep. So you push that before the grand final?
That's the bye. So the rest...
Or you get rid of the bye altogether?
The 6 have the bye that finish in the top 6. There's a wild card. The season's over for the rest of them. And we really work out who's deserving of the finals. I think it's worth the AFL exploring. Observation number 4, how did not one of the other 3 umpires see the Samson Ryan mark bounce 3 metres in the air after he dropped it? I thought it was the worst week of umpiring I've seen yet. And I'm not sure how 4 umpires out there can't see an obvious free kick in the goal square, a mark I should say, that's hit the deck. How could you not overrule that, Sam? You're the umpire defender in this panel.
I can't defend that.
Come on.
I can't explain it nor defend it.
You defend them weekly.
Do I?
Yep.
How's that?
You're an umpire apologist.
Am I?
Yes.
A sympathiser?
You are.
That's news to me.
That's almost as obvious as the Dusty Martin push in the back last week. It was somehow not called.
Well, what about Ginnivan getting his head ripped off at the G yesterday? That was extraordinary.
Number of push in the back still went unwhistled.
Hodge, I was listening and consuming your commentary on Friday night, did a magnificent job, and I could sense your frustration with the bumper barring of Gawn being penalised. Is this not allowed now? Observation number 5. Are you now not allowed to bumper bar your opponent, which we have been taught since we're about 14 years of age?
I think when umpires see that if it was a full back on a full forward, they let it go every day of the week because it's a tussle. It's when a ruckman's getting hit by a person who's 6 foot and the umpires, they're not playing against each other. They're doing it off the ball. I need to stop this. Because those 2 free kicks were, as you said, you get taught whenever you see a ruckman, stop him from getting to the line because he'll either mark it or touch it if your team's having a shot. And that's the first rule you get taught when you're a midfielder. Don't let the person go there. And for the couple of those ones, and the second one against Pal Pepper, I think it was Pal Pepper who was running back. There was 3 soft bumps, and the umpire called it. I could not believe that. I almost fell off my seat when I saw that on replay.
Yeah, but that wasn't even. That was just to get. That was a stop play. That was.
It was a shot.
That was
Chandler was having a shot for goal.
No,
from
the goal had been kicked.
That was
had
the
it
next
not?
one. So
Yeah,
the first one was
Powell-Pepper one.
Chandler was having a shot for goal from the boundary, like 50 out. Powell-Pepper was stopping Gawn. They clearly went after him and they targeted him.
Your
so
club,
the umpires
your old club pioneered this.
often does that. The umpires were aware of it, and Powell-Pepper's just trying to stop his run to the goal square to stop him getting to the goal line, and it's 50. I would have played 2 games if that wasn't allowed, because you play on players that are much faster than you, and you're taught, do not let them get goal side. Bumper bar them. Phil Walsh is just screaming at me.
It looked like something the umpires were ready for.
Yeah.
Didn't
Well,
it?
it's not. I
Is
think
that what
they-
happened to you on Saturday, Kane?
Yeah,
You
no,
got bumper barred too many times?
I got bumper barred, Hodgie, and didn't
How
get
does it
near
work with you're not allowed to shepherd more than 5 metres off the ball?
Well, that's probably the way that they'll defend it. So I suspect Razor, and you'll sit with Gerard, there will be a defence of this, and they'll say, well, you can't block a player's run off the ball. Well, I'll say it's been happening for 100 years, and we've never, ever paid it. I mean, Viney went after Lyceters. He was going back for a ruck contest, and that wasn't paid. Don't get it, don't understand
Kane,
it.
if you go and watch a Ford v defender, you'd pay 30 free kicks from the defender who's trying to push the forward away from their position, block them from getting back into a leading spot. It's a game of football. As long as it's not done over the top or too physical and knock them to the ground, it's a part of the game.
Hodgie, it was interesting tactics from Port Adelaide once again. They sent Drew to Viney. And Viney, after a huge game the week before, was well and truly curtailed. Interesting that they went to him, given that you've got Petrarca and Oliver to go to. But at the same time, Butters was having an absolute picnic. Why wouldn't, would you think next time this happened, Viney goes straight to Butters?
You'd think so. I think in today's day and age, first of all, you're going to let your player try. You back him to beat him. So you back Viney to have enough experience to try different ways, whether you just start your starting positions at different points. But after a while, if he's not having an impact and the opposition team are getting on top, and someone who was Butters could not speak highly enough of the game that he played on Friday night, but you go and try and change it up. Even if it's Viney having the mindset to go, well, hang on, can I go and have an impact in and around? We're getting beaten in the first half convincingly. Can I go and stand on him? They should be throwing that up to the coaches if the coaches haven't made that move.
Everyone's had their say on West Coast, but it was alarming watching that. Yes, they genuinely look like they have given up, and I just don't. Well, Adam Simpson, he won't survive the year, and that's just the way that footy works. I don't think there's a coach in history that would have survived a record over 3 seasons.
He's just re-signed for another 2 after this discussion. I'd be surprised if that happened. I really
Hang on,
would.
Glenn Jakovic doesn't think he should survive the week.
I realise that.
So I think they'll probably get to the end of the year, and look, he's doing it. I watch his media conferences every week after the game, and he makes a lot of sense. He's clearly shattered with the way that they're at, and he's out of answers, but he's not making excuses. When the effort drops off like that against a team that you should be in and around, and you lose by 116. Speaking of broken tackles, there may have been 60 broken tackles yesterday. I haven't seen anything like it. So
They got a lot of waffle players playing.
I understand that, but
Surely that's got to be a little bit of leeway for him. If you look through that list and say how much experience do they have, and Kane, you play with younger guys, when things don't go your way, you need the senior guys to step up and try and take control. They've got hardly any in that side. It's all, you look through the list, half the people who watch football wouldn't know the names of half the players. So when things are backs against the wall, they don't know what to do. So
this
they
is
panic
why
and look
it's
like they
not,
don't try.
yeah, and it's not all his fault. I for 2 years I wrote a column for the West Australian. I went back and looked at, because the writing had been on the wall for this for a long time. In March 2021, I wrote a column that said it is premiership or bust for West Coast. I went and spoke about their salary cap, how they've maxed that out, the lack of talent that they've got coming through, the injury list and the re-signing of players that keep continually getting injured. They didn't have any draft picks. The last paragraph is West Coast is on the last roll of the dice with its current squad. It is win in 2021 for the Eagles or prepare for the rebuild. The writing was on the wall that this was needed. And so it's not just Adam Simpson, it's list management, it's fitness, it's the way that they've managed the salary cap, it's the loyalty to the players that have been such great champions of that football club. But at the end of the day, no coach in history, unfortunately, has survived a record like that over 3 years.
That's why it will be interesting. They had this discussion, I think it was this time last year or even late last year, and I think they made as a club the decision
He was the guy.
He was the bloke to rebuild. And the question is, I mean, they're going to get some senior players back over the next few weeks, but the question is, if you bring a young person in, they're going to get tortured as well. So I know the same is happening to Sam Mitchell. They seem to have been able to do it, but Sam Mitchell is a legend of that particular footy club. He's got plenty of credits. But I'd be surprised if they turn their back at the end of this year on the coach, given that they've had this discussion. They're supposedly on the same page.
How do you see it, Sammy?
I come back to the list all the time, and we say, their injury list. Their injury list is always... These guys haven't... Elliot Yeo hasn't played a full season since 2019.
I think he's playing this week.
Luke Shuey hasn't played a full season since 2019. Nick Nat signed on for 2 years in 22 after playing 8 games that season. Hasn't played since. He's 32. Jeremy McGovern's just signed a 2-year deal. He hasn't played a full season or close to a full season since 2019. Even Elliot Yeo... So it hasn't been close to a full season since 2019. At the start of 2022, when he's already signed for that year and already signed for 2023, they still felt the need to extend him through to 2024. And you think, why? So we get what those players have achieved. They're immense talents. They will forever be enshrined in the history of that footy club. Have they not been aggressive enough to turn it over, to get more Ruben Gimbies into the club, to start the process for the future?
Well, I think if you went through their drafting, they've had too many misses. They've had a couple of really big wins, that most notably Oscar Allen, but Jared Brander. I mean, that was a shocking miss. Yeah. Didn't work at 2 clubs. And obviously the Kelly one, giving away all those first rounders, hasn't helped. But Kelly, to his credit, has been a real star this year. He's playing better footy now than he has for any year they've played there.
So Ruben Gimby's pick 9, going to be a gun. Elijah Hewitt pick 14 injured, played 3 games. Campbell Chesser pick 14. The jury's out on those guys. Could be great players. But they used no first round picks in 20, 19, 18. Brander came in 17. And then you've got Oscar Allen, Liam Ryan, thankfully came after him. But then you go back to 16 and Daniel Venables, unfortunately, career-ended due to concussion.
And they lost Willie as well.
So that's where I don't understand how they haven't seen the writing on the wall for this.
Can I paint this picture for you? Imagine all those guys did retire. Let's just say they wiped them the lot. They lost by 20-odd goals yesterday.
But then none of those are playing, Gerard.
I understand that, but the only way they can be competitive in their rebuild is to bring those guys, at least a number of them, back into the club.
Yeah, I mean, someone like Gaffy, you better not having him play with the form that he's playing. Like he touches it 10 times.
Just has to play.
I think he had 1 contested possession. His meters gained has dropped right off. His ball use has dropped right off. So it's whilst they're great names, what they're contributing isn't significant. Other than Dom Sheed played a really good game yesterday. And finally, Richmond's older players just looked old, and it happens. Revolt, Cochin, Prestia 11 touches. That was alarming for him. McIntosh, 30 years of age, nearly hardly touched the footy. Pickett's 30, 12 touches. Grimes looked really out of sorts with his timing in the air and also his lack of lateral movement. And Nankervis has been injured. He's not that old, Nank, but does look like he's copped a pounding. And with no draft picks coming up, I've got concerns, as you know, about the state of Richmond's list. Hodge, over to you. Hawthorn, we've touched on the Eagles, but Hawthorn played them yesterday, and I guess the contrast in the way that these two teams at the similar end of the ladder have gone about it, you wanted to speak about that?
Yeah, it was pretty much a question to you 3 guys. Is when Hawthorn made the decision to offload Tommy Mitchell and Jaeger and Gunston and the likes to have this young inexperience, did you think it was the right or wrong thing to do with their rebuild, and have you changed your thoughts on that since? Oh, and you can't take the West Coast game in because West Coast has been belted by a lot of teams. But what you've seen from the young guys that they've been given midfield time to, given responsibility to them, did you initially like the decision, or did you think it's not the right way? And have you changed your mind since seeing it?
I would have thought that you'd keep Tom Mitchell because I think he's a fantastic player, just to maintain some competitiveness through the rebuild. Going through a season winning 2 or 3 games is really difficult, I think. But at this stage, it certainly hasn't stopped their enthusiasm. And it was just great to see the show yesterday because it was pretty clear that Weddle off the half-back line and the 3 or 4 options you've got going through the middle, Hodgie, if I can use well, they look like they're well set for, a quick jump up the ladder over the next few years.
I like that we can agree or disagree on the approach, I suppose, Hodgie, but I like the fact they had such conviction with it. It was that the decision was made and they were going hard, and Luke Bruce could easily be at GWS. He'd been willing to go as well. So they made their bed. They were prepared to line it. In fact, it took them 2 years to get it through. They tried the year before and couldn't. I mean, Sam Mitchell was ringing up opposition clubs himself to say, are you interested in these guys? So
it went actually stronger than they thought, though, because they didn't want to lose Cameron Bruce.
No, yeah.
So it's even worse than they actually planned for.
I was shocked when it initially happened, Hodgie, to answer your question. I was like, wow, this is going to be ugly. Sam Mitchell did a terrific article with afl.com.au towards the start of the season and explained the strategy, and it was the best thing that he did. And he said, look, we need to rebuild while no one else is doing it because it gives us options that other clubs don't have. And
with
now with
Tassie
coming in, which he wouldn't have known at the time, but may have had an inkling, made a lot of sense, and I'm comfortable with it. I think he's an excellent coach, as I've said repeatedly for a long time. North Melbourne and the way that they lost that game, Hodgie's been a big talking point.
Yeah, so the thought process of that, and you sort of sit back and go, how could a mistake like that be made? But then when you looked at the bench and you hear Tony Viney, so much happens at the bench with rotations coming off. There was an injured bloke, and you sort of sit back and go, players make so many mistakes throughout the game, and we don't crucify them. But people have been out after the North Melbourne people in charge of the bench saying, what were they doing? How can you make such a blunder? It's an error. Like yes, it costs them a game. It's not as if it's a final. They're not going to make the 8. So you sort of sit back with so much that goes on at the bench, especially with some inexperienced people there. Clarko not there. They've had a lot go on with the footy club. It was a bit of a blimp, but I don't think we should be as harsh with these guys. Everyone does make the Blues on game day.
Everybody wants to win. Everyone wants to sing the song, but North Melbourne were big winners, I reckon, on the weekend. Just the way they played, the competitiveness, Wardlaw coming through, Sheasel up forward. And Scott, as I said beforehand, they just look so much better, and they didn't get 4 points, but they'd be quietly happy, I think, behind the scenes.
George Wardlaw's first game, he looks a player.
Yeah, he is. I think that was a positive thing for North Melbourne. Obviously, the last 18 months hasn't been ideal with Horne-Francis going, and then the question of should we have got rid of him or should we have kept him, considering he was still contracted. But what we've seen from Sheasel, what we've seen from Wardlaw. You can see there's two blokes that they can build a club around. They can find the ball. They're aggressive. They won't shirk an issue. I think it's something that the North Melbourne supporters would walk away, as you said, Gerard, that yes, we're disappointed we didn't sing the song, but tell you what, you can sit back and go, our next few years are going to be pretty bright with some of the younger guys, which we didn't know if we had 5 weeks ago.
Before we get to your thoughts on Carlton, Sammy, the latest out of Melbourne and Clayton Oliver.
Yeah, we did describe it as the Novak Djokovic hamstring of the AFL. Now, Melbourne have released a statement saying that Clayton Oliver will be assessed throughout the week. They said scans, as we discussed earlier, did reveal a hamstring strain, but their high-performance manager, Selwyn Griffith, has said to the website, Clayton had some soreness at the end of the game following a clinical assessment from the physios and the medical team. Scans have showed he's got a hamstring strain. At this early stage, we anticipate Clayton won't be available in the short term. And he goes on to describe what we were talking about earlier, that a lot of it will depend on the player and how he gets through training and recovers from training.
Back to the West Coast Eagles, if I may. They're odds-on favourite to get the number 1 draft pick. North Melbourne had the number 1 draft pick. They traded Horne-Francis for 2 players. Should the West Coast Eagles do the same, Hodgie?
From the build-up, this is the magic beans question that Damien Hardwick was talking about, but I haven't heard a build-up like this for Harley Reid. Like this has been spoken about. He's massive. He's everywhere. So he must be, from what all the recruiters and that are saying, he must be miles ahead of the next best coming through. So if you, with all the talk that you hear, you wouldn't trade him off for 2, considering he's as highly rated as any of the number 1 draft picks that have been coming through over past years.
Would you trade him off for 3?
That's a different question. If you can get 3 first rounders, it'd be somewhere different, where you'd have to have a strong think about it.
I know he's banned, but the offers for Horne-Francis were significant before he was drafted.
I'll have to go back and have a look. Yeah.
Might have been 3.
There was a future as well, I think, involved in there and a swap of sorts.
Yes,
but
that's probably been the last time.
It really depends on the depth of the draft, does it not? I mean, what West Coast identifies players that they can see a future for and can keep in Perth as well.
It's a pretty strong WA represented draft, and the last thing they need is for the young kid to play 2 years and then go home.
That's the other thing. If you can get 3 first-round draft picks and you know that 2 of them are going to be Perth-based at least, then that's where you'd probably consider it, because, as you said, the Horne-Francis thing, plays a year, goes home. You don't want that backing everything, putting all the eggs into one basket, taking the first pick, and then he leaves you.
Having said all that, what North Melbourne got for Horne-Francis and what we saw at the weekend, maybe not such a bad thing.
They traded their pick 1 as well, of course, for Cadman that's gone to GWS. Got to factor that in as well. The Blues, Hodgie, what did you think of their troubles?
It's all polish. It is all polish with Carlton. We know that they can hunt the ball. They're, as far as contested possession, clearance-wise, they hunt in and under as good as any side. But it's just that final effort. Like, as far as marks inside forward 50. In the last month, they've been the number one team for marks inside forward 50 over the last month. And you sit back and look at their score, look at their win-loss record, and you wouldn't have thought that. But it's the issue for them is where they take those marks. And if you look at a team like Melbourne, who try and get it to the top of the goal square, make a contest and have a shot from 20, 30 out straight in front, Carlton are doing everything but that. Where they're taking their shots, where they're directing their ball, it's a shallow entry inside forward 50, which means they're having a low percentage shot at goal, or it's towards the boundary line. And I know Darcy Moore was standing in the road, and everything that went in his vicinity, he marked it on the weekend. But they need to relook at where they're hitting their forwards up, what position of the ground. Because if you'll continue to have accuracy issues like Carlton, you need to change something up. So the effort, endeavour, everything in that area has been no issue for them. It's been the finish up polish and their decision maker going inside forward 50, or when they do get inside forward 50, finishing off their work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. That's why I was surprised Michael Voss says it's not their offence, it is their defence.
If you added Darcy Moore to Carlton's back line, would they make the 8?
It still won't help them with their efficiency going forward. It's their back line looks okay. I don't mind their back line. Probably might need an extra rebounder in that back end, but
They haven't got an intercept, have they?
Well, McGovern's supposed to be, but he's not playing
Can't
like
get
one.
near it.
like that. But it's centre. In my eyes, I could be wrong. In my eyes, it's centre forward. What they're doing with the ball in hand, moving it into their forward half.
All right, and quickly on that,
Mind you,
man,
Darcy Moore would be pretty handy now.
talk to me about his game, because you wanted to give him some love in a minute.
Oh, I think everyone's sort of spoken about it. When you got a bloke down there, when someone is appointed captain of a big club like that, you don't know how they're going to react. He first ticked the boxes with his speech on Anzac Day and how he spoke after the game about how good he's been. But then what he does on the footy field, how he leads that group, he stays calm. They've had a lot of injuries, but I don't think there's someone who you can be more impressed with as a first-time skipper than Darcy Moore.